December 1993, Washington, D.C., U.S. On December 27, 1993, U.S. News and World Report cited that the Justice Department was reinvestigating the Finders case. The news article mentions that some of the unresolved questions are allegations that the Finders group are linked to the CIA, and whether or not the investigation into their activity has been closed inappropriately. Overview: the many unanswered questions about the Finders case now have Democratic Rep. Charlie Rose of North Carolina, Chairman of the House Administration Committee, and Florida's Rep. Tom Lewis, a Republican, more than a little exercised. Could our own government have something to do with this Finders organization and turn their backs on these children? That's what all the evidence points to, says Lewis, and there's a lot of evidence. Law enforcement sources say that some of the Finders are listed in the FBI's classified counterintelligence files. As background, in early February 1987, 6 children were taken into custody in Tallahassee, Florida. 2 men were charged with child abuse, but charges were dropped. The men said the children were transporting these children to Mexico to a school for brilliant children. Their mothers were located in a group called the Finders. At the same time, Washington, D.C. police and U.S. Customs Service agents raided a duplex apartment building and a warehouse connected to the group. Custom reports cite that among the evidence seized were detailed instructions on obtaining children for unknown purposes around the world, child trafficking, instructions to keep the above 6 children moving, and how to avoid detection, several photographs of nude children that appeared to accent the children's genitals, photographs of children involved in animal sacrifice rituals, an altar, jars of urine and feces, and a staging area, all of which appeared to the custom agents as an indoctrination center. Customs agents were told to drop their investigation because it had become a CIA internal matter, and that is documented in their report. Officials of the U.S. Customs Service called in to aid in the investigation said that the material seized yesterday includes photographs showing children involved in bloodletting ceremonies of animals and 1 photograph of a child in chains. Custom officials said they were looking into whether a child pornography operation was being conducted. November 1992, Austin, Texas. People of Texas versus Francis and Danielle Keller, convicted for aggravated sexual assault on a child, sentenced to 48 years. Overview. News articles chronicling the trial cited more than 1 child thought to be abused at Fran's Daycare in Austin, Texas, operated by the Kellers. But this particular case cites their conviction of only 1 child, while news reports say other charges with other children are pending. Douglas Wayne Perry, the ex-husband of one of the 2 other alleged perps, who were former deputy constables, confessed that he, along with the constables and the Kellers, engaged in beer and sex parties, during which several children were sexually assaulted by the adults while photographs were taken. He recanted his confession, but then pleaded guilty to a charge of indecency with a child. He confessed to tearing a head off a doll and threatening the children that if they told, their heads would come off the same way. The children described ritual acts, being terrorized in a graveyard, seeing animals killed and bodies dug up and mutilated with a chainsaw. A 6-year-old child who also claimed to be a victim testified on the behalf of the 3.5-year-old and called Fran's Daycare Fran's Hate Care. The defense lawyers used videos showing some of the younger children recanting, saying the abuse never happened, to try to undermine the case. The parents claimed that one of the perps was flashing threatening hand signals during the child's testimony. The defense also stated that the claims were too outlandish to be believed because the children also spoke of going on airplane rides and seeing a baby killed. A child led an investigator to a graveyard where they found animal bones. Parents of 2 children who said they were abused have filed a civil suit holding 3 people accountable for not reporting the abuse. Another mother said, "I put my son in a mental hospital as a result of this abuse by the Kellers, and it's only been through over a year of intensive psychotherapy that he's begun to partially heal." March 1992, Orlando, Florida. Margie Wright pleaded no contest to 3 charges of attempted sexual battery and 2 charges of attempted lewd acts and was sentenced to 5.5 years in prison. Jim Wright was convicted of raping and fondling 5 children. Overview. 3 news articles describing the case cite that this couple were charged with molesting children in the context of satanic rituals. The parents of 3 of the victims moved residences, and the prosecutor expressed concern because the children had been threatened by the cult not to testify. The victims' parents met the Wrights through their church. The children reported that they saw Wright sacrificing a dog, slit its throat and stomach, and removed some entrails. Sheriff's investigators found the dog's skeleton near the Wrights' trailer. The Wrights molested children during their magic show. The victim said he pulled a gun out of a hat and made their underwear disappear. They said that Jim Wright put a bad curse on them and said devil words. The children described satanic symbols, chalices filled with blood, and a box containing a corpse. They had been told not to tell or their parents would be killed. Maggie Wright testified against her husband while she pleaded no contest to reduce charges. January 1992, the state of Washington versus Paul Ross Ingram. Paul Ingram, former Thurston County Chief Civil Deputy Sheriff and 16-year law enforcement officer, was arrested November 28, 1988, following allegations of sexual abuse made by his daughters, then about 18 and 22 years old. Ingram waived his right to counsel and made incriminating statements. After 6 months of further investigation and interrogation, Ingram was charged by amended information with 6 counts of rape in the 3rd degree, 3 counts per daughter covering July through October of '88. He tried to withdraw his guilty plea, but that was denied. It's been widely reported by the officers involved that Ingram also confessed to ritually abusing his children in the context of satanic ceremony, which his daughters also claimed took place. Richard Offshee of the FMSF tried to talk Ingram out of his confession by claiming he confessed in a trance-like state. Imagine that. And proved that by suggesting to Ingram a case scenario which very well could have happened. In reality, Offshee's experiment was not proof of false memories or proof of a false confession, and the court rejected these claims. Both Offshee and Elizabeth Loftus of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation also testified at Ingram's clemency hearing, trying to help obtain his release. According to news articles and the clemency board transcripts, Ingram's son also attended that particular hearing and asked the board to keep his father in prison, as did other members of the Ingram family, which the board did. February 1992, San Francisco, California, Michael A. Aquino. Plaintiff, appellant, versus Michael P.W. Stone, Secretary of the Army. Dismissal of lawsuit affirmed. Overview. Michael Aquino, the founder of a Satanist group, Temple of Set, was a lieutenant colonel in the Army Active Reserves. After the Presidio daycare case, he sued the Army after they titled him under an investigating report for indecent acts with a child, sodomy, conspiracy, kidnapping, and false swearing, and for his dismissal from active reserves. The documents state, Aquino contends that evidence collected by the Army CID did not justify its creating an investigation report titled under his name, and that those involved with the investigation were motivated to remove him from the Army because he was the founder of the Temple of Set, a satanic religion. Aquino filed suit in the district court under the Privacy Act, USC 552AG, to compel the Army to amend the investigatory report about him and for damages resulting from his discharge from the service, which he attributes to the inaccurate records about him. In 1990, a continuation board of the Army Reserve recommended discontinuing Aquino's service in the reserve, and he was processed out of the Army. Aquino was never criminally charged, and the Army released its report and titled him 3 months after the criminal statute of limitations ran. Aquino's lawsuit against the Army was dismissed. Note, Aquino claims have received a meritorious certificate from the Army in 1994. September 1988, Santa Rosa, California, People v. Darrell T. Ball, court number 14750-C, pleaded no contacts to lewd acts with six child victims. Overview. The case involved brutal sexual assault of these children in the context of a devil worship club. The two main culprits, Charlotte Devereaux and Darrell Ball, were caught and sentenced to prison. The Criminal Investigative Division of the Army interviewed some of these same children in their titling investigation of Michael Aquino in the Temple of Set. The case was listed above. This case was described by the prosecutor as involving multi-victims and perpetrators and ritual abuse. Although Ball and Devereaux were the only ones charged, the prosecutor described the extreme terror the children experienced and the difficulty for them to testify. During the 18th-month preliminary hearing, the children testified that they were threatened to keep quiet or the perpetrators would eat their mother's hearts and make them eat it. They described being given injections or were bled and being tied up. Darrell Ball threatened witnesses to keep them from testifying. The children also described being molested while being filmed with a banner in the background reading, Super Duper Child Molest Day. They were forced to watch the video of their own molestation afterwards. A plea bargain was struck, reportedly to spare the kids from having to testify further. In September 1998, Charlotte Devereaux was declared a violent sexual molest predator, the first female to have that distinction in California.